Muy buenos días, buenas tardes a todo el mundo en el webinario. Vamos a empezar en un minuto. Gracias por su paciencia.
Okay, good afternoon, good morning. Thank you for your patience. We're going to start in 1 minute.
Muy buenos días y buenas tardes a todo el mundo. Marta, si podrías compartir la pantalla.
Good morning, good afternoon to everyone. Marta, can you please share the screen? I am Holly. I'm the regional representative partner working in the Americas, and I have the honor of opening this event.
Siguiente lámina, por favor. Si no han dado cuenta, vamos a tener
You
interpretación.
would have realized that we're going to have interpretation services during this event. And below, you will see a map where you will be able to choose your language. I hope it's working at the moment. Can you hear the interpreter? Please, next slide. Today, we're going to have 2 excellent panels where different people are going to participate in, including Alessandra Moncada, who is the director of CARE Ecuador, and she has worked for more than 20 years in development, human rights, human and mobility rights, and programs on gender-based and on citizen participation on human rights of people, amongst others. Alessandra has also worked in Ecuador, Colombia, Venezuela, and in Spain, and she has developed her professional experience in cooperation entities, international cooperation entities, and she has also played different roles with different public entity programs. We also have Mónica Tobar from CARE Ecuador, who is the manager of programs and resources mobilization in Ecuador. She has experience in the public sector as well as in the private sector, and also in civil organization, organizations. She also developed other projects, strategic planning projects, and she has also facilitated in different workshops for the design of different strategies at institutional level. In Mujer a Mujer, we have Ana Carita Sanchez, who is a migrant woman who graduated in psychology, and she also has a master in research and social sciences based on gender-based. She also has a diploma in psychoanalysis and mental health. During her professional path. She also worked as different roles and also work in the radio on topics related to human rights. Karen forms part of Mujer a Mujer Foundation, who is the organization that promotes the defense of human rights on women and for the LGBT groups in Guayaquil. In CEPAN, we have Marjorie Lopez Merchan. She is graduated in social work and she has more than 25 years of experience on programs and projects related to human rights of women, emphasizing on a life free of violence and promoting the women organizations. Currently, Marjorie coordinates the CEPAN strategy plan in Guayaquil. And finally, we have Lenny Quiros, who is the president of the National Union of Workers, of Domestic Workers, who has more than 25 years of experience fighting for the rights of the non-remunerated workers in Ecuador. This event is co-sponsored by the Women Refugee Commission as well. Next slide, please. As I just mentioned, the project that we're going to listen to today was financed by ELGA, which means in Spanish, improving learning for humanitarian assistance. ELRA is a subsidy entity, a subsidizing entity, which aim is to improve the rights of people affected by humanitarian issues by promoting learning and solutions, scalable solutions to improve their lifestyle. ELRA receives financing from the UK Aid Financial Office. Next slide. This event is going to last 90 minutes. Alex is going to start, who is going to give us an overall description of in Ecuador, and then after we're going to give the word to Monica, who's going to talk about the results of the project. We're also going to have representatives of the different organizations, and at the end we will have an area for questions and answers. Please be prepared for these questions, and if you want to post any of your questions in Spanish and English, you can do it on the chat. We are recording this session, and I would like to ask you to please not to speak very fast so the interpreters can interpret you accurately. Next slide, please. Now I'm going to give the word to another person that I really admire, whose name is Alex. Thank you very much for this presentation. Admiration is mutual. I'd like to greet everyone who is with us today. Please use the chat to introduce yourself or to post any questions or any comments. Today, I'm going to be presenting the context and the results of the study, who is going to be presented by my colleague, Monica Tabar. Then we're going to have a dialogue with all the different organizations who participated in this study. As you all know, it is very important to be able to share this study. As Holly already said, this study was financed by ELRA. And it was financed by the Humanitarian Foundation. I would like to present these outcomes that came from this project in order to start providing answers, important answers for all those people who suffer violence during situations of crisis. I would like to talk about the project. As I said before, the donor, who was ELRA, decided to support us in this project, which is a research project which was developed between August 2021 until January 2022. The aim of this project was to understand how effective was the implementation of the program as well as the money transfer, especially when we considering the grave links between intimate violence with all the hosting communities or communities who are vulnerable. Our focus was to put in practice this process in a specific city, in a city that suffered the crisis, whether it was a financial crisis or a health crisis. The project took place in Guayaquil, in the province of Guayas in Ecuador. Ecuador, as many other countries in Latin America, are recognized for the grave inequalities that affect these countries, where you can see that the wealth stays in the hands of only a few. The crisis of COVID and the health crisis as a result of the pandemic had very serious implications on the life of people. Therefore, this not only aggravated the poverty situation, but also the violent situation of the country. In Ecuador, we have a very complex situation due to the immigrant of the Venezuelan population who try to reach other countries in the south, in Colombia, Ecuador, and Chile, looking for a better life and better opportunity to survive, as well as the Colombian
como fruto de los conflictos y de las condiciones.
Population who have also emigrated to our country after having suffered social conditions, etc. We also face other type of migrant flows from people in Ecuador leaving the country to, for example, North America, looking for better life conditions. The gender-based violence was exacerbated during the pandemic, as some of the victims had to be locked inside their houses with their own perpetrators, which caused increasing the violence in these populations. Some of these people are working in their formal market, and that made it very difficult for them to meet their isolation or lockdown conditions established by the local governments. In Guayas region, precisely, the femicide cases increased, especially between January and March of 2022, where we saw 7 reported cases. There are many other cases that were not reported, but 86% of these cases, the aggressor had a direct relationship with the survivor. I would like to highlight and name the organizations that we work with in this study, which is the Women's Refugee Commission, CEPAN Guayaquil, the UNTA, Mujer and Mujer Foundation, and CARE. In this next slide, you will see the violence conditions people live in our countries, and especially in Ecuador. Very worrying, especially as it aggravated during the pandemic. These data that you see here are the femicides that occurred in 2022, which represented more than 50% of the femicides that occur in the previous year. In other words, this represents a substantial increase of femicides from year to year. 86% of these cases, the femicide had a sentimental link with their victims. Also very important to highlight that despite the absence of data and statistics in my country, the latest studies about 4 or 5 years ago showed that in Ecuador, 6 for every 10 women have lived any kind of violence in the country. We also base this on the testimonies that we have, and also based on the studies that our organization that we work with has provided us. And these figures increase when women are migrants or refugees or belong to minority groups, like Afro-descendant groups or indigenous people. It's also very important to highlight that women over 15 years old, 42% of them have faced some kind of violence during their lives. So it is important to note that from a very early age, these girls start to face this kind of violence, which is caused by a patriarchal society in which they live, where they are discriminated, especially women and marginalized groups. In the next slide, I also wanted to share with you some specific data of Guayaquil. It is important to consider that out of all the interviewed women, 40% reported having experienced some kind of violence. 50% of the lesbian women also reported having experienced their sexual orientation as a negative circumstance, and 56% of the LGBT groups reported not being accepted by their family, which represents a discrimination risk. And 18% of them reported having lived intra-family violence due to their sexual orientation. So having seen this information, now I'm going to give the floor to my colleague, Monica Tovar, so she can explain and talk about the results of this research. And also, so she can tell you the outcomes of the organizations that participated with us in this research. Thank you very much, Alex, and good morning to everyone who is with us. It's such a pleasure for us to be able to present these results of this research, which was created by a group of organizations. Here in this slide, you will see the program model and the reference process that we dealt with. The Women Commission of Refugees provided technical assistance and the best practices in order to implement the cash transfer programs in case management. They also were the ones that led these projects and this evaluation process. As Alessandra said, this consortium was led by 3 local organizations, TEPAN, Mujer a Mujer, and UNTA, with the ones who identified the survivors of gender-based violence cases. TEPAN and Mujer a Mujer Foundation were the one that did the case management, especially on the survivors of the gender-based violence. They also dealt with the survivors by giving them advice of how to receive these cash transfer programs. CARE was the one that provided the cash once the survivors were identified and once it was reported that these survivors were not encountering any risks. Then we did a continuous follow-up on the case management until this program came to an end. The cash transfer was $100 and it was given to 93 participants. We also have other participants who participated in the research but who did not receive the cash. They were only managed, the case was only managed. This was the process that we followed and how we review all the intervention with all the involved organizations. As you all know, women and migrant women and children are very vulnerable to certain risks after a humanitarian crisis. And we all know that these cash transfer programs for the case management has a very important impact in their lives. We also noticed that there are certain gaps on these programs when we see the results of the programs. And we also study how to be more effective in order to implement these programs. Once this project was implemented, the consortium decided to do a risk impact analysis for the case management. This study was a comparative study to evaluate the effects of this program, including cash transfers, in order to support the survivors who have been exposed to gender-based violence. In comparison with a group who accessed this case management, but who did not necessarily receive this cash. And for this, we established the following questions. First, to see what was the effect of these cash transfer programs on gender-based violence survivors. Which ones were the change paths for the LGBTQ groups when they received this cash transfer? What changes these survivors experience within their family or within their financial situation or within their families when they received or not this cash transfer to pay their expenses, and also what recommendations. We also wanted to listen to the recommendations in order to replicate this project in the future. And based on these 4 questions is how we developed this study by using several methodologies. This research included quantitative and qualitative data, and 184 people participated in this study. 120 were part of the case management project, and 30 people were only involved on the case management program. In the beginning, we started with a quantitative survey for the 2 groups, where they needed to provide geographical information or information related to their personal well-being or their access to a specific service. Also have a qualitative research by doing in-depth interviews and by conducting participative workshops with the people who participated in this project. We also conducted interviews, in-depth interviews with the project personnel. In this case, we included personnel from CEPAN, Mujer and Mujer, from Junta, and also from CARE Ecuador. And finally, we came at the end, we conducted a workshop directed to the gender-based violence survivors and the project personnel in order to establish what the outcomes of this project were. It's important to clarify that this is a comparative study in order to see what the results are when introducing these programs within the case management. And for this specific project, also to be able to study the intimate violence cases. We divided this project on 3 dimensions. We focus on the economic agency, the participants, and the social aspects. But before talking about the results, I also would like to give you an overview of the demographic profile of these participants. 40% of them were between 25 and 34 years of age, followed by people older than 40 in both groups. Also, to mention that in both groups, they both had the same level of education, and in both groups, 40% of them did not receive any money in the last 30 days. This was more or less the general overview of the participants who participated in this project. In terms of the financial situation, we concluded that the case management, including cash transfer programs, reduce the violence, the intimate partner violence. And so it was evident that the group that received this cash transfer could improve their lives and also use this money to start little businesses or other issues related to their work. And this resulted from a regularization process in the country where many of these people could not have access to formal employment because they were migrants. This was information that the participants gave us, and thanks to them, we were able to see their needs to regulate the situation, the legal situation in their country, so they can live a more dignified life with greater opportunities. Also, let you know that within this group, these participants mentioned that they made more money in the last 30 days as a result of the investment that they did with this cash assistance that they received. Some of these participants also told us that they never went back to their aggressors due to receiving this money and being able to choose a different lifestyle. They also expressed having a greater financial autonomy, and they also reported that they are now more independent, financially independent, and that they can make decisions on how to use their money. Some of them also commented that they did not rely on the opinion of their family to use their resources, that they made their own decisions. They also consider themselves as the drivers of change in their lives, and not just being the women that normally ask for help to others, as they could make their own decisions on many topics, not only financially, but also making decisions on their family. On the other hand, the group who did not receive this cash assistance reported having used more strategies to face the crisis. Some of them mentioned that in the past they have to, for example, have sex in order to survive. This group also commented that the case management contributed to improve their capabilities and their knowledge. But a lot of them had to still borrow money from their family and friends in order to pay their basic needs, and that caused them to having to pay an interest on the money that they borrowed. And that's why they reported that they needed to look for other ways to gain money in order to allow them to overcome their situation, especially the gender-based violence situations or the intimate partner violence situations. Also, it's important to highlight that the intimate partner violence increased especially on the group who received the cash assistance. We also saw that the percentage was higher amongst the migrant population than the Ecuadorian population. We also saw a relationship on this context to justify why this gender-based violence increased. The intimate partner violence was 35% lower between the migrants and refugee people in comparison with the Ecuadorian people.
Posiblemente no haya habido una concienciación o una sensibilización muy profunda sobre el tema de la violencia.
We also saw how this gender-based violence awareness increased. We also identified that amongst the people who received this cash transfer, their financial resources increased in the last 30 days. 22% of the participants reported having been able to gain more money because these people invested their money in order to start little businesses. The people who received the case management, but who might not have received the cash assistance, reported having improved their capabilities due to their psychosocial assistance. And thanks to the psychosocial assistance, they also improve their knowledge on the law, on the empowerment and self-esteem issues, which also improve their lifestyle in order to face the violence that they are experiencing. These case management services not only include the psychosocial assistance, but also legal, it included legal services so these women could be more knowledgeable about their legal rights when reporting their perpetrators. But these obviously depended on the participants to wanting to report these cases because they didn't always wanted to report their perpetrators. However, with these psychosocial legal assistance, they knew what their rights were. They also could have conversations with their perpetrators, which contributed to reduce the violence in their lives. Some people even reported being able to separate, to leave their perpetrators. In terms of the well-being, for those who received the case management and the cash transfer, they reported that they were able to cover their basic needs. These people were very concerned about their children and about their mental health of their children and their family. And by entering these programs, they reported having improved their relationship with their children as well as the well-being of their children. Some of these women use this money to go to the doctor or to go to or to receive psychological treatment, which improve their well-being and their homes. They also reported having improved their self-esteem and also their resilience. They also reported knowing better their rights is due to the psychological assistance that they received. And during this program, they knew their rights, they knew how to tackle their situation if their rights were violated, which allowed them to decrease the violence they had before participating in this program. They cover all their basic needs and their family's basic needs, as well as they improve their knowledge and to empower them and to improve their resilience. With regards to the group who received the case manager, but who did not receive the cash transfer, they reported having a better mental health. They also improved their autonomy, they improved their resilience, and also they improved their self-esteem and trust in order to face their perpetrator or even to leave their perpetrator. This case management process included collective workshops to create awareness amongst people who experience violence, and these workshops also reduce their feeling to be alone in this world or to feel very lonely, as they connected with other people who left very similar situations to them. So they have this link or this solidarity between them. It's very important for these projects to be sustainable as well after the project has come to an end. And that is why these workshops are very important for them. So these people are continuous being connected so they can empower each other and feel, and they don't feel so lonely when they experience this kind of violence. Here you have the testimony of an Ecuadorian woman who participated in this case management process and who also received the cash assistance, and who also participated on different workshops. And she said the following, you can read this testimony in this line. She just said how she felt. She said, today I feel like a queen. Today, I see that I was victimized and that the only reason why I remained with the father of my children was for them, but I was often hit, abused, he shouted at me, and now I tell my children, with money, you are the queen, because money can resolve a lot of your problems. I'm also gonna put this in the chat so you can think about this a bit more. and see what we have evaluated with this program. Any question that you may have, please post it in the chat. And now I'm going to give the floor to Alessandra, who is going to talk about the local organizations who implemented this project. Go ahead, Alessandra. Thank you, Monica. Please feel free to download all the research. They are in English and in Spanish. You can just see the link on the chat box. Please download them, check them. I would love to hear your comments and your opinions. So and also it's important for you to distribute or disseminate this information. We are now have the honor to talk to the representative of the organizations that implemented this project. I would like to highlight two important issues before going ahead with this. In Ecuador, it is the women organizations, mainly the ones who lead the victim assistance or the who lead the programs on gender-based violence survivors. They are the ones that encourage people to report the perpetrators, who advise about the legal rights, make sure that all these survivors have psychosocial assistance access and the support of an answer integral plan so they can strengthen their lives. They have a huge role to play. It's a pleasure for me to be able to share this space with Kade Marita, Madri Lopez, who represent these leading organizations who, with very little resources and with very little recognition, often do such a huge job to help their survivors to have a better future, a future that all women deserve, a future free of violence. So now let's start with Karen. My question to you is, how this project answered the needs of the gender-based violence survivors and the intimate partner violence survivors? Obviously, considering the refugee women and certain vulnerable populations. Good morning, thank you. It's such a pleasure for me to be able to talk about our experience as an organization, which we did. One of the biggest challenges that we face was with the LGBTQ population, as their needs appear to be invisible to the community. We work in a team with other organizations where we could visibilize or visualize their situation, and also in order to create awareness among the population for the existence of the violence amongst the LGBTQ community. One of the challenges that we face also for the migrant population and for the LGBT population is the amount of vulnerabilities that they have to face due to the fact of just being women. This is often not accepted by the population. These women fear to being attacked or being discriminated, and in many occasions they don't report this violence. Some of them are women. Some of these women were mothers, and they needed to look for resources to meet their basic needs, and they were too scared to report the situation. Violence is a social um, item or a social situation that is not visualized accordingly. We need to create more awareness amongst the society so we can report any violence situation or any vulnerable situation. It is also important to mention that it's necessary to have the adequate resources or to have the collaboration with other organizations in order to strengthen the situation of these women and to empower these women, so these women can have access to integral services, non-discriminatory services, with a humanity approach. In some cases, these women are very scared to report their violence. Another problem that we saw is that, as Monica Tovar told us, is that there were certain populations or certain group of people who had to prostitute themselves in order to obtain benefits, financial benefits. We also have to provide assistance on reproductive assistance. We also provided legal advice. Some of these women often fear to be deported, and that is why this legal advice is very important so they can know what their rights are. Some people think that because they are migrants, they have no rights, and this is not true. It is important to empower these people so they are aware of their human rights. Route maps, providing the route maps, and also providing information with institutions that they can go to, are, etc. And also to be able to provide them with the necessary tools to face their situation, especially for those who live or belong to a discrimination group. Also to provide them information on what organizations they can go to talk about their current situation, which is very important to them. Their main worries of these users had to do obviously with the financial needs to cover their basic needs, had to do with their concerns on their family to educate them. They were also very concerned about the lack of employment. A lot of them work in the informal setting, and they also don't seem to have emotional tools to face the situation. That's basically it. Thank you very much, Karen. It is very important to hear how you help them resolve, these women to resolve the situation. I'm going to please put in the chat any questions you might have so I can just ask the panelists. Now I'm gonna give the floor to Margaret Lopez, who represents the PAN Guayaquil. And I want to ask you, Margaret, how do you see this project meet their basic needs of these women? Thank you very much, Alessandra and colleagues. Firstly, I want to acknowledge the team. The CEPAN team has been responsible for the case management, but also the entire CEPAN, because they provided us a lot of knowledge and a lot of learning, which is also a good practice to be able to share this learning. Thank you, Alessandra, for acknowledging this organization, this civil this social uh, the civil society organization, so we can understand what happens to these gender-based violence survivors. From CEPAN in Guayaquil, this is done under an integral approach. Due to the impact that these have on the life of these women, not only on them, but on their families, on their communities, on the negative and the negative factors and limitations that these women face. This process, this social violence process also does not allow this integral approach to become the ideal that we look for, as it gets aggravated by their levels of poverty that they are encountering, which cannot satisfy, which does not allow them to satisfy their needs. This poverty obviously affects women more than any other part of the society, and that is why we take into account other factors that does not allow them to integrate in their society. And this is I'm referring to these neoliberal policies, etc. This project, the aim of this project was to focus on an integral approach. I think this was the most important learning for us with regards to this project. In general, I can say that this project was an innovative answer for us, for CEPAN, especially considering the complexity of this situation, of the situation for these women. This was a very interesting project, and it was also very important to acknowledge how these answers could contribute to resolve practical situation of these women. As Monica said, part of this research was this initiative of these women to be more empowered to start little businesses, for example. This was obviously a challenge to us. I would like to mention a sentence that was said by Lita, our executive director, that said, addressing these issues show us that not only would need to look after ourselves against heat and evident needs, but that we need to see what are their background that moves this violence, and that it stops us from including integral answers to these programs. I think that is also very important. Thank you very much, Marjorie. Kade told us what the needs were for these sectors, and Marjorie complemented what she said, is to look further than just the hits or the violent symptoms, but to see what is the underlying issues that cause this violence. Now we're going to go to the third question from Lenny, who is the director of the autonomous workers and domestic workers. It's such a pleasure having you with us. And I'm going to ask you the same question. How do you think this project address the specific needs of these women who participated in this program? Thank you, and go ahead. Thank you, and good morning to everyone. This process was in the beginning a big challenge for us. When UNTA was proposed to conduct this project, and we were told that we had to work with TEPAN, we were very excited because it's something that we wanted to do for a long time. One of our challenges was to work with migrant people and to see how we were going to do it and how it was going to be the easiest way to reach these people, because to reach these people is not that easy, especially on migrant communities, because these people don't want to talk, they don't want to report, they don't want to do anything like that. So this was a huge challenge for us. But this project, this mini project, allowed us to learn a lot on these topics, allow us to recognize women who might not have been hit or assaulted by perpetrators, but who had mental repercussions on based on their relationship. To see how many of our colleagues who did not receive this transfer, this cash transfer, could improve their situation by receiving these different support from them, which make them making decisions once they were empowered by the project. Many of our colleagues, even they did not receive this cash transfer, were able to improve their lifestyle. They were able to use these resources in a very positive manner. They were able to see how they were empowered through these workshops or the psychological support that they received through this program. So they could start surviving and facing their situation. All of this, seeing all of this was already very satisfactory for us. For us was also a learning curve. This was done by many sectors, by many leaders, by many organizations. And these joint efforts were very important to all of us. We all identify different situations depending on where we worked, and then after identifying the situation, then we look for their support, and that's how the program started. For me, it was a very gratifying experience, because sometimes looks like what we do, it does not really influence or doesn't really have a positive effect, but it does have a positive effect. It has a positive effect where, in order to make these women face their situation more positively and to improve their lives and to improve the lives of their family. And the support that we provided with this project not only helped gender-based violence mothers, but also their children. And that is already very important. We need to continue with our work. This is just a process. People who work with these initiatives need to continue with their work so we can help more women, more colleagues to come out this violence cycle, and they can come out of this situation as a result of being migrants or belong to a specific vulnerable group. This project has definitely provided us a lot of learning, especially in UNTA. We were able to meet our lesbian colleagues or our migrant colleagues, to know their situation and to understand how different they might be and how vulnerable they can be to violence. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you very much for allowing me to participate in this project, and it's been such a pleasure working with all the different organizations like Junta FEPAN and Mujer a Mujer. Thank you, Lenny. Now we're gonna go to the second round of questions, and I now would like to ask our colleagues. Let's start with Marjorie. Please, can you tell us what the main challenges were when implementing this study? I would not really like to highlight the context where we conducted our activities. Obviously, the crisis aggravated their situation, aggravated the issue of unemployment. It was a very dark moment in our history. And this is where our activity, during this time is where our activities took place, which prevent these women to become autonomous and independent. So one of our challenges for our team was to direct these assistants, this class assistant, without putting them at a greater risk with their perpetrators. The civil society organizations were the ones that helped us to help these women in order to decrease these risks that I was talking about. In some cases, these perpetrators are actually criminals, which makes it even more difficult, not just for the survivors or for the victims, but also for us, for the professional people that work in this project. This project allows us to provide innovative answers when implementing the project. We saw that we had different models to address violence. These models are not static models. They are models that will allow us to enrich ourselves as it we rely on other organizations who are involved in this project. Another challenge was to assess human mobility women. The percentage of human mobility women was very low in comparison with other cases, but it was a challenge for us to deal with them or to resolve their situations immediately or to meet their basic needs. We also narrow links and alliances with other organizations whose aim is to take care of these kind of women who have a human mobility problem. We also had other challenges that as a result of the end of this project that could be mentioned now, which is, for example, once we were resolved these basic needs, which was very important, then we also saw other challenges, like the challenge of what is next, or what are they going to do next in order to meet their needs in the future. Thank you, Marjorie. Very important to highlight these challenges, especially those that had to do with violence having increased, not only in Ecuador, but in Latin America in general, because this is a very important issue that had very serious implications on the life of women. Lenny, can you please tell us, under the UNTA point of view, which were your main challenges when implementing the project? one of the main challenge was talking to women, because they often used to say to you, no, not at this time, because the aggressor is there, and it was very difficult to communicate with them. Often these people are very violent, and they question you, why are you coming to talk to my partner? And those were really big challenges for us, so we could so they could know about our project, so they could also know how to come out of this violent cycle. In the beginning, to implement this project, we also established what language to use to approach these people, which was not an easy task. It was a real challenge for us. See how we're gonna implement it, how we're gonna talk to these people, what kind of lingo are we gonna use, how we're gonna explain to them what this cash transfer means, or how they can benefit from this project. We knew that our aim was to look after these people, to see how we can take them out of this violent situation. So we needed to identify how to find the best ways to get this person out of this situation without any implication. Sometimes some of these women had 2 to 3 children, and sometimes these people just happy, or not happy, but they're just going to be exposed to violence so they can receive the money to feed their children. This was a huge challenge for us, to get to know the people. Also, another challenge was to get to know who the migrants were. These people often fear to be deported, so they don't identify themselves. They often stay with their partners, even though they suffer violence, because they receive money, or they receive financial support to cover their basic needs. So that was another challenge. And that's basically all in terms of our organization, the challenges in our organization. Karen, would you like to complement to what Lenny and Marjorie have said? I think my colleagues have basically, in general, covered all the challenges. Just highlight that Guayaquil is the second biggest city in Ecuador, is the main port, and this is where most of the migrants and refugees are. And 70% of the Ecuadorians that live in Guayaquil are in extreme poverty or in poverty. So to cover their basic needs is a very complex situation for us. Another challenge as an organization was that a lot of our beneficiaries had children who needed to be looked after, or who needed integral support, or support that was linked to psychological needs, etc. So for this, we created a space so these women could drop their children, so they could go to work in a safe. They could drop the children in a safe place so they could go to work. This was really important for us. The LGBT population was not exempted from these needs as well. Another challenge was to determine who would receive this cash transfer and who would not receive this cash transfer, because in general, most of these women had needs. They needed to cover basic needs. So it was very difficult to establish who was going to receive this cash transfer or not. Adriana Uber was the one who was in charge of doing this evaluation, and for this, she created a risk evaluation plan in order to identify who needed most this cash transfer in order to survive this violence, perhaps by identifying who was in a situation, the most critical situation. This evaluation obviously display or identify the women who were at greater risk. We were also guided by the non-victimization principle, as it was not just about generating this program, but also about generating a risk plan to see how we could improve the life of these women by giving them this cash transfer to cover their basic needs, such as food, transport, or personal items in order to leave this violent circle, or even to dress their children, or even for women who were even thinking about going back to their country of origin. We also consider if the woman, in order to decide who was going to receive this cash transfer, we also assess if the person was pregnant or had a lot of children, or in general, who lived in the most critical situation. And also, by not exposing, we also identify how to provide this cash transfer without exposing these women to any risk when delivering this cash. And sometimes we even identify the possibility of accompanying these women in order to provide them this cash if needed. I also would like to tell you, for those who are attending this webinar, is that we need to guarantee a local answer by using these tools that will allow us to provide this humanitarian assistance. Now, the last question, please be brief on
Y en un minuto, cuéntenos.
answering this question. What would you think would be your recommendations in order to sustain the outcome of this project? This question was posted in the chat. What do we do so these women who succeeded in or became our independent or came out of this violence circle, what recommendations will we have after implementing this project? Please, you've got just 1 minute to answer this question. Okay, so what recommendations would I give you? Well, just that please don't leave these women alone. Don't abandon them. Continue supporting them. It's not only important to provide them this cash assistance, but also to provide them continuous psychological assistance. This is a very long and complicated process for these women, so we never ever leave them alone, to continue supporting them throughout, even after the project has come to an end. We need to be there, we need to support them and all the time, and not allow them to fall into the same violent circle again. That would be my major recommendation. Okay, so now, Kare, what would be in 1 minute your main recommendation? Please. 3 recommendations I would like to give you. First, to strengthen the agreements with other entities or other organizations in order to have non-discriminatory assistance, and also to incentivize women to report their perpetrators without fearing being recriminated. Second recommendation is to continue with the support system and to continue advising them throughout their life so they can come out of this violence circle, and also in order to help them to obtain financial resource to improve their lives. We talk about migrant population, so they don't often know their legal rights. So the legal advice is very important. And the third recommendation is got to do with the mental health. So those people who have suffered gender-based violence need to be supported throughout, they need to be integrated in the society, and despite their cultural differences. So we need to strengthen their supporting network. Marjorie, last question. What will your recommendations be for these supporting entities? My recommendation is that always include psychosocial activities. We need to strengthen their network of these women. We need to increase our level of solidarity among these women, and also increase their visibility or create awareness on their rights. Something else that is also very important is to be able to complement these initiatives with macro entrepreneur support. It's important to help them to know how they could improve their lifestyle. We need to study more or help them with their entrepreneurial processes, whether it is with psychological support or whether it is with financial support or legal support. And I also would like to insist on the need of considering organizations with great prestige and knowledge on gender-based violence, because this will be the base to provide this psychological support or the legal support, etc. And also considering the experience of community organizations, for example, by including UNTA in this project was very important, since they knew very well what was happening in this sector. They work hand to hand with these women. They assume this role very well by accompanying them on this visibility process. I think that it is key in order to sustain these kind of initiatives. Thank you, Marjorie, and thank you to all of you who have listened to us. I just wanted to talk about two key issues. This project would not have been able to be carried out without the participation of the different entities and without the participation of these women. It is key to acknowledge their resilience and their attitude towards this project. And in order to acknowledge this resilience, the cooperation entities and the state and the protection system agencies can include these cash transfer programs in their supporting process for those who left or who have been exposed to gender-based violence. Lenny, Marjorie, and Karen have already spoken about this being an interagency process with at-risks that proposes greater supporting processes for the small businesses, entrepreneur processes of these women who participate in this program. I have the honor of having participated in this dialogue with CALC and with CR. Thank you very much for your attention. And now I will give the floor to Holly. Okay, what can I say? I think the presentation has been very interesting and the experience has been very interesting. Martha, please let's share the screen. We're now closing the webinar, but I just wanted to talk about the next steps. We are recording this event in English and in Spanish. Remember that we're going to have another webinar on June 21st, that is going to focus on another project in Colombia, similar situation, but different circumstances. And there you will have the opportunity to learn from other colleagues. In terms of the sources, we already written it in the chat. I just wanted to thank you for your participation and for your interest to improve the lives of the gender-based violence survivors with these cash transfer programs. Let's now close by showing you a very interesting video on this experience and program. And after that, I will just see you all in a couple of weeks coming.
Pues yo pienso que es como la lucha que tenemos con nosotras mismas cada día, de no desmayar, de seguir adelante, de levantarnos a vivir.
Una lucha que va hacia un mismo, o sea, diferentes luchas, pero van hacia un mismo objetivo, que queremos que nosotros no seamos más violentadas.
El corazón de esperanza, de alegría, me confirma que si luchamos, así tengamos miedo, podemos luchar, buscar nuevas oportunidades, que siempre hay algo más por hacer, pero con decisión, con coraje, con valentía.
Me veo capacitándome cada vez más, aprendiendo y enseñando. Quisiera también estudiar música, cantar no como profesora.